Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event. Fight fans worldwide, you've tuned into the #1 undisputed boxing podcast today. This is the Boxing Breakdown. Now, your heavy-handed, hard-hitting host, Mark Roxey.
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's going on out there in boxing land? I hope everybody is doing well, and thank you for joining me today on another episode of the Boxing Breakdown. And I just wanted to give you a little heads up that you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we have a new account on Instagram. It's going to be my name, Mark Roxey, and there you'll find all the episodes and all the content for the Boxing Breakdown. So check that out. And don't be afraid to get into the conversation. And if you like the Boxing Breakdown and you want to comment or you want to discuss something that we talk about on the episode, please leave your comments there. And I look forward to them for sure. And we got pretty much a nice episode for you today. I think we're going to hit on a lot of different topics. And what I've been thinking about is the importance of making sure that these episodes are educational for those of you out there that are in the boxing community, and that for those of you that are what we would consider old guard are hearing some of the topics and some of the issues that are really pertinent to the young fighters and players in the boxing community today. And hopefully you'll find this episode rewarding and educational and hopefully valuable to you. And if you like that, definitely don't forget to leave your comments and write a review in Apple Podcast or Google or any of those places where you can leave your comments and give us a good positive thumbs up review, man. We appreciate that big time. And without further ado, I would like to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Harold Hunt. What's up, brother?
What's up? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been a busy week. It's just been busy. I'm sure it's been busy for you. We've been bouncing back and forth about what this episode was going to be about. And I just got in literally 20 minutes ago from the gym, and we are grinding, bro. We are. Shout out to Indio's Boxing. Shout out to Martino Jules and the team over there, Jonathan Rodriguez, Indio Rodriguez, and the whole crew over there. Louis Melendez, what's up? We're working over there. So I really, really enjoy what's happening in the gym right now. The fights, there's a bunch of really nice fights coming up for those boys. And I'm happy to be part of the team and contribute to what's going on over there. And then I've been working over here in my gym, doing all kinds of stuff with fighters. And it's just been really, really busy. Between that and my real job, bro, I don't know, Harold. How about you?
Well, I've just been working and trying to keep everything going and just keeping up with my favorite sport. There's so much stuff going on. You know, we're still being affected by COVID as a fight has fallen out, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, for sure. COVID updates, man. We've been doing COVID for a year now. It's been a solid year. And, man, like this episode, for those of y'all that are listening out there, welcome again. We're going to be, talking about, a handful of topics today, including, Leon Spinks, and we'll be rounding that out with a conversation about the latest news with Mark Breland and Deontay Wilder. We're going to touch a little bit on Britain Hart's fight with Paige VanZant, and maybe discuss a little bit about some upcoming fights. And then my final topic is going to be discussing fighters and their padded records. Ha! That's going to be, I really want to chop that up with you. I have a lot. It just came to me, man. I know that fighters have some mixed thoughts about this. They're misguided sometimes about fights. And so I just want to chop that up with you and see what you think about that. And so without further ado, man, I just want to take a moment to send out my condolences to the Spinks family and everyone in the boxing community. We lost, a true warrior, a kind gentleman, and really an amazing man, Mr. Leon Spinks, ex-heavyweight champion of the world, and, someone who has the distinct title of upsetting Muhammad Ali. And just a really, he dies at the age of 67, and my heart goes out to the family. And I know that the folks at the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame will do something special for him. I know that they had plans on doing something with him anyway. I just, my heart goes out to him and his family, So did you hear about that news?
Yes. I'm familiar with, his demise, but he accomplished some great things in such a short amount of time. And his offspring was also a prominent fighter. So there's so much to talk about that he deserves our admiration for.
Oh yeah, man, for sure. He was an icon in the sport, and someone who really made a name for himself. His record was 26 wins with 17 losses. 14 of those wins came by big way of KO, and he was KO'd 9 times, and he had 3 draws. So he had a very eventful career, and but what a gentleman, and what a smile this guy had, man. Like, you look at the pictures of Leon Spinks, and you just can't help but just fall in love with his smile,
Let's talk about him. Now, what's phenomenal to me was he was in the Olympics with his brother, of course, and they were the first brother duo to win gold medals. That was spectacular. And because of that fame and that glory that they both received, he got an opportunity to fight Ali in his 8th professional fight. What do you think about that, Mark?
Yo, I think that's incredible. And you're talking about the 1976 Olympics, right? Because that was yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, man, I think that's incredible. I mean, imagine stepping up to the plate to fight the greatest, right? At age 24, right? That is just, he must have been, I don't know. What would you think about if you were stepping into the ring with Muhammad Ali at 24 years old?
Well, because of the fame that they got, he was marketable.
Yeah, for sure.
To fight Ali with only 7 fights. They just saw the dollars. They didn't really necessarily care about how many fights he had. They saw him on TV so much during the Olympics. He had this pro style. He had this lineage, he and his brother, the smile, the enthusiasm. He just was selling tickets, even though he only had 7 fights.
Right. And he was at only 24 years old, so he was really a kid. And the guy fought 15 rounds, right? 15 rounds. I mean, that's back in the day. For those of y'all that are listening that don't remember the days when boxing allowed 15 rounds, now the most you can go is 12. But there was a time where 15 rounds was, expected.
Yes, before TV jumped in there and decided they want the fight to be an hour long, it went to 12. Right. And some injuries and that happened that they thought they needed to shorten it from 15 to 12. But that was spectacular. And he survived an Ali rush at the end, the last, round 2, 14 and 15.
Yeah.
He actually came on at the end and took the fight from Ali.
How about that? How about that?
His famous line was, "I'm not the greatest, but the latest."
Yes, exactly. That's amazing.
So he was supposed to defend that belt, but he decided not to. The WBC belt against Ken Norton, but he decided not to and took the rematch with Ali. Ali, of course, as you know, won the fight, became a 3-time heavyweight champion, and that was Ali's last win as a professional boxer.
Wow.
He lost every fight after the Spinks fight.
Right. So that fight that Muhammad Ali had, that was a split decision in 15. Gosh, where was that? Where was that? That was in Las Vegas, right?
1978, I believe. And it was in...
I think it was at the Hilton Hotel in Vegas. I'm looking at it right now. It was at the Hilton Hotel in Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and then he fought him right after that. So he fought him in February 15th of 78. And then he fought him again. He fought Muhammad Ali again only in September.
A 7-month turnaround.
Yeah, they wanted that back. And then obviously Muhammad Ali won in a unanimous decision there, and beat him. That was at the Superdome in New Orleans, 1978 at the Superdome.
Yes.
Wow. 15 rounds too, unanimous decision turnaround. So yeah, and again, he went on to fought the likes of Larry Holmes. I mean, he fought everybody, everybody in that division.
Yeah. His fight with Holmes was a title fight, but he was knocked out. He dropped down to light heavyweight and he fought Dwight Kweli Muhammad for a title and lost.
Wow. But that was later, right? That was much later, wasn't it?
Much later, yes.
Because he fought Holmes in 1981.
Right.
And then he fought Dwight Muhammad in 1986. So that was like 5 years later.
Right. As a light heavy.
Right. Right. He fought Carlos De Leon. He lost that fight with Carlos De Leon. But then he put together like a series of wins against Lupe Guerrero, Rick Keller, Tom Fisher, and Tommy Thomas. Right? Oh yeah, and Kip Klein. That's hard to say. Kip Klein. And then he fights your boy Dwight Muhammad.
Dwight Kweli Muhammad.
Yeah, for sure. But this guy had a storied career, and they just don't build him like that anymore. And
that's great. But his family made history. The only boxing family to have 3 undisputed champions. Leon Spinks was not an undisputed champion, but he was a champion. But his brother Michael was undisputed heavyweight champion at one time, and an undisputed light heavyweight champion at one time.
Right.
And Leon Spinks' son, Corey Spinks was an undisputed welterweight champion. So that's what makes him a royalty in boxing as far as families are concerned.
Right. Wow.
Corey was undisputed welterweight, and Michael was undisputed light heavyweight and heavyweight. Something he didn't. This is all from memory. Something he did not want. He didn't want to defend a portion of it, and he was stripped. Something happened.
Right. That's amazing. That talk about a family business, right?
Yes. Yes, undisputed.
Yeah.
A lot of siblings and they fight, but how many? That's the only family that had 3 undisputed champions in their bloodline.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
And the only family to have 2 gold medals in their bloodline. They made history on both sides of the fence, amateur and pro.
Wow.
That's family.
Yeah. Imagine them rolling up to an amateur fight together. You got the whole family there. I could just see it. Wow. God bless them. God bless the family, and God bless Leon Spinks for sure. He will be missed. Let's take a little romp jump, little skip and a hop jump over to the Mark Breland, Deontay Wilder situation. What's up with that, Harold?
It is so interesting. Initially, it was somewhat interesting that Mr. Wilder has such accusations. I can't say one way or the other. I can't really say. In a sense, they're outlandish. In a sense, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't really say. So I'm going to straddle the fence. However, I was impressed that Mark Breland did not come out initially and rebut any of this. He said, "My reputation speaks for itself, and I'm just going to just let it ride." However, eventually, Mark, he just couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't swallow the continued barrage of accusations about what he did and what he didn't do, and he came back with some other situations that he thought the world needed to know about Mr. Wilder's training habits and his demeanor in the training camps and how he handled his business with his associates and his team. And that caused Mr. Wilder to say other things. Personally, Mr. Breland may have some personal issues physically, but I don't really feel that needs to be voiced for the world, So that was interesting. But what do you think, Mark?
Well, I mean, full disclosure, I have watched for many, many years. I'm from the BK, as you know, and Mark Breland, in my neighborhood, he grew up in my neighborhood, and I watched him as a young man in the Olympics, and I watched him walk through the neighborhood and just be a stellar icon for everybody to look up to. So Mark Breland is from Brooklyn, so I must give you full disclosure, and I must tell you he's also from Gleason's Gym, which I have an affinity for, and I've spent lots of, thousands of man hours there. And I've got to know Mark Breland over the years pretty well. And so from that perspective, it's hard for me to talk about this without knowing the content of this man's character. And so when I discuss it and have a conversation about Mark Breland and Deontay Wilder, I must disclose that I don't really know Deontay Wilder at all. I mean, I only know his public image, so I don't know that side of the story. But what I do know is that Mark Breland is he's a very, very special man. He's a kind man. He is a man of few words, and he really is a genius scientist as far as boxing is concerned. So props and respect for that. As a trainer, what I will tell you is when I read Mark's statements, I completely understood what the affliction was. And as a trainer, I understood the perspective that Mark Breland saw the professional relationship and how that relationship had been going. And I can tell you it's not uncommon. It's definitely not uncommon where, I find it to be unconscionable that Mark Breland didn't even have Deontay Wilder's telephone number. And that in order for him to train him and have conversations about what was so and what was going to work like he did in the beginning, he had to go through, different channels that was set up as some sort of deflection, if you will. And the reason I call it a deflection is not to be disrespectful to anybody, but, the relationship between a fighter and a trainer is so special. And if you're not in communication, then you're not doing anything. You're really not. It's going to be real hard to train a fighter when the fighter turns you off. When the fighter finds, the fighter looks at a trainer and goes, oh my God. Like I know when fighters look at me, they're like, oh my God, here he comes. Here comes my trainer. He's about to kill me, right? He's about to work me to the ground until this thing is perfect. And that's a hard relationship to have with a fighter. And so when you can't communicate on top of that, you're going to have problems. And the other thing is there's only one, there's a lot of jobs that trainers take on. Trainers take off foul protectors. Trainers put on gloves, take gloves off, tape gloves, run to the store to get water. The trainers will do anything for their fighters, anything. Right? So when you have a trainer that's willing to do anything for that fighter, and that's the premise of the relationship. We want you to be as great as you can be. We want you to be the best fighter that you can be. And we also don't want you to get hurt. And that means that sometimes you have to pull the plug. Right? Sometimes you have to make a call that you may not want to make, but it is the only way because you'd rather make that call and suffer the consequences than have your fighter dead. And when a fighter's bleeding out of their eardrum and they have shattered eardrums, right? And their equilibrium is knocked off and you know that they're about to go down, you can see it, that they're about to go down. You have no choice. Mark Breland, as a trainer, as far as one trainer to another, he made the right call. Now, that doesn't mean that the fighter has to be happy about that call. In fact, it doesn't surprise me. It's pretty
standard.
You would expect that the fighter needs to, if you're going to blame someone, you're going to blame the guy who called the fight off. I get that. But you're talking about a man that's been in your camp from the very, very beginning. When you shake
12
up
years.
Listen, I had a fighter for 12 years. I had the fighter do the same exact thing to me. Well, not the same exact thing, but similar thing to me. So I understand what it feels like for that to occur. And the only thing that I can tell you is that Mark Breland handled this situation like a gentleman, right? He never made a public comment. I tried to get him on the Boxing Breakdown 5 or 6 times. I've reached out to him personally and said, I'd really love to get you on the program, not knowing the depth of his feelings and that he would write this, several page, brief on the situation. So I wasn't really aware that was how he felt it. And he didn't really want to have this conversation. He's going to put it in his memoirs. He's going to write a book about it and he's going to put it in his book. And I get that. But I wanted to have him on the conversation, on the Boxing Breakdown, because I really wanted to be able to speak to him as a coach, as a trainer, as someone who's dedicated my life to the fighters, to really talk to him about his decisions and the choices that he made and kind of commend him on that. I can't really speak to you, Deontay Wilder's accusations for, some water being put in, the suit being too heavy, the towel being thrown in when he was about to go down. I really can't speak on that from the fighter's perspective because I haven't had a conversation with Deontay Wilder and I don't really know him that way. So, but what I can tell you is as a coach and then as a spectator, my heart goes out to Deontay Wilder because he lost a good coach and because he's got to figure out how to navigate this thing without the man that was in his corner. And sometimes you have to, if you're listening, Deontay Wilder, sometimes we gotta learn how to set ourselves free with forgiveness toward other people. And so if something was done in the camp and those things were not discussed and were not talked about, then, you know, you're the cause of the matter, brother. You are the boss. You are the guy at the top of your team. And so if there's something that has to be discussed, it's, you know, you are the cause in the matter. I know we're always the cause in the matter. So, Harold, hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on my position in that. What do you think?
Well, you're neither black or white on the situation. And I appreciate, you know, how you came across with that. And I understand that the media can take things out of context. I understand that emotions can cause certain things to be said on either side. And I am sorry that they did split.
Yeah, me too. Because,
However,
you know, I'm sorry that they split. And I'll tell you why. Because you're going to be, Deontay Wilder, you might say that, okay, you haven't seen the best of me, but I believe that we'll never see the best, because when you lose your head trainer and you lose the guy who got that jab working, and you got that guy who's willing to, you know, save your life. I mean, that's hard to lose a person like that, you know, that, you know, but I get it. Look, if they had some arrangement, some pre-arrangement on Deontay Wilder's side, because I want to be fair in the conversation. If Deontay and Breland had a conversation about, no matter what, never throw in the towel, right? If that conversation took place, I get it. You know, I get that.
I mean, the mandate from Mr. Wilder was what it was to be, regardless of what the world saw, and it was violated in his mind, so therefore he took appropriate action, because this is his show.
Well, you think it's okay. Appropriate? I don't know about the word appropriate. Well, I mean, how is it appropriate? Like, okay, let's do it this way. Let's say, like, I'm the CEO of a corporation, right? And you're the CFO of the corporation, right? And we've been doing this for 20 years. And all of a sudden I lose you, or I fire you. Where does that leave me? That leaves me having to fulfill a position that you've had for 20 years. And hopefully not skip a beat. And most corporations, most companies that I know that replace their CEOs or their CFOs or whatever FOs, there's going to be a little bit of a pullback in the what you would call the investors, right? The investors are going to freak out, right? The shareholders, the board may freak out, and you may have a little bit of a shakeup on your hands. And 9 out of 10 times, that's what happens. 9 out of 10 times. So, you know, if you're really bright, you know, I mean, how many more years do you think Deontay Wilder's going to fight for? What do you think? How many more years? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? How many?
Well, he says that he's financially free. So that bears a lot into his thinking.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which any man would. And appropriate or not, that was his mandate. Right or wrong, that was his mandate. That was the law he put down, and that is what he acted on, because that was what he put in place. Regardless if we agree with it or we think it was wrong or right, that is his call, and he did so. So moving forward, as you said, a hole has to be filled, or not.
Right.
He may have someone else he wants to fill it with, or he may handle his own situation at this point.
Right.
So we really don't know, but the back and forth in the media, it's sensational. It's going to be a great promotional items when Deontay fights again, and when Mark trains a major fighter, because I'm sure his phone is ringing off the hook.
Yo,
I met Mark.
Mark has some great fighters, man. Mark has his pick of the amazing fighters. He's got a couple of fighters that are going to be world champions. I know one particular fighter who I met up with. We met up with one of my fighters in the amateurs, and this kid is a carbon copy of Mark Breland, height-wise and skill-wise, and he's super, super decorated. You probably know who I'm talking about. He's super, super decorated as an amateur, and he just recently turned pro, and this guy's he's gonna do something big. So, I mean, he's got the pick of fighters. I don't think that's really an issue. I think, trainers go where they can make the biggest impact. Trainers work with the fighters where they can make the biggest impact. And I think that Mark has his eye on a handful of fighters that he can do that with. And I think that hopefully, I know that Deontay Wilder is a man of God. And I know that if he can find some forgiveness in his heart and, figure out a way to mend the ills that have been created by the world of boxing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that, there may be hope for them to reignite their relationship. I think anything is possible, but you got to be unreasonable about it. You got to be super unreasonable about the possibility of it happening. And, I think it would be good for him. I think it would be good for him, especially now. It would ignite his career again. And I mean, he's ranked number 1 in the WBC, and he's ranked, I think, probably like 3 or 4 in the WBA. So, he's there. I mean, big fights with Tyson and Alexander Povetkin. And, I mean, there's some guys, man, there's some good fighters up there now pulling into, the heavyweight division. So hopefully he gets what he deserves, before others, take the seat,
Well, I see this is going to be something that promoters, networks, and what have you will like to see, would like to use in a promotion.
Yeah.
Because it's sensational. It's eye catching. It's the sound bites from Deontay are powerful, and you have a lot of major promoters who are weighing in on the situation.
We don't want to. I mean, look, everybody's got something to say. Here we are on
Right.
the boxing breakdown, and we're breaking down Deontay Wilder and Breland's, their riff. But at the end of the day, I hope y'all realize, that what I'm interested in, Deontay Wilder and Mark Breland, is just a reconciliation of some sort. Because you know what? Like I always say to my fighters, like I always say to anybody that I'm working with, these are the people that are in your life, and you're never going to get rid of them. They're there forever. So you might as well figure out a way to come to peace and terms with one another, because the alternative is pretty bleak.
Yes. And, the standpoint that you have as being a trainer,
yeah,
I can't necessarily see that initially without your explanation. And I definitely see it in a different light. The public sees it one way, and the casuals see it one way, and myself, I see it another way.
Yeah.
But from your standpoint, it's it's right there. It's the reality of the situation. So I hope the listeners appreciate your standpoint.
The bond between a fighter and a trainer is inexplicable. It's a relationship that is very, very difficult to explain to anyone that hasn't had it. And a fighter pours out his soul to be the best fighter that he or she can be. And a trainer does the exact same thing. The trainer eats, sleeps, breathes, whatever the fighter is eating, sleeping, and breathing. It is that kind of a bond. We know when our fighters are hurt. We know better than anybody that our fighter is hurt. And to have to live with knowing that you did not protect your fighter is probably one of the hardest things to ever live with as a trainer, and especially a fighter that has a family, like Deontay Wilder has a family. He has children, beautiful children, and someone's got to keep an eye out for him. And sometimes the people that love you the most are the ones that get pushed away the easiest. The people that love you the most are the ones that are easiest to throw stones at. And there's a lot of people that wouldn't want a guy like Mark Breland to be there after 12 years. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of people positioning, jockeying, right? And you know who loses? Is the fighter. Because the fighter needs those people around him to protect him no matter what. We did a great podcast. I don't know if you remember the podcast with Adrian Clark. Protect yourself at all times. Shout out to Adrian Clark. Love that book. Love you, bro. And the whole book, his whole life is dedicated to protecting fighters. Protect fighters. Understand how to put the right people around you. So that's kind of how I come to it. And no respect or disrespect intended to Deontay Wilder, his team, or Mark Breland to have this conversation. I really wanted to have the conversation because I wanted to enlighten those out there that have these delusions that, if I don't like my people, I'll just get rid of them and put some other people in. Yeah, okay, you can do that, but you'll end up just like every other fighter has ended up. That situation never works out. It doesn't work out that way. You've got, fighters. You could take someone like a Teofimo Lopez and his team. Do you know how many times people tried to break him and his father up? Do you know how many times people tried to break Floyd Mayweather and his family up? I mean, come on. That happens, bro. I mean, you have to be so strong in this industry, and you got to know, who your team is, and you got to have complete faith. Shakur Stevenson, you know how many times they tried to break him and his family up, him and his team up? Come on, man. And these fighters, the fighters that get it, they get it. They understand the gravity of that, right? There's nothing you can do to break that bond, or you should not be able to break that bond. And usually if you can find the money trail, you can figure out what's going on. Pay attention to the money, and you'll figure out what actually happened. Because, and the other thing is, in closing, because we're going to move on right here. We've exhausted this conversation. But the last thing I want to say is that everything that we see in the world, we see as contextual. What do I mean by that? I mean that everything has a context to it. You and I could watch the same accident happen, and you'd have a completely different version of that accident that I did. We're watching the same accident, but we both have a completely different way of viewing that accident. And the way that we view the accident has more to do with our past and how we got to that moment where the accident occurred than anything else. So just think about that a little bit. think about the fact that you, Deontay Wilder, and Mark Breland will never, ever see this situation the same way because you couldn't possibly. You contextualize it in the way that you contextualize it, and he contextualizes it, meaning Breland, in the way that he does. But in the end, the context, when you flip the context, what's possible is anything. You can create anything. But you got to flip the context. You got to maybe try to look at it from a different way. Right? That's the point. That's the point. So good luck, Deontay Wilder. Good luck, Mark Breland. I hope it works out. And that's all I got to say about that one. What you got, Harold?
That was excellent.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And, so let's switch gears here for a little bit real quick. Let's get into the Britain Hart versus the Paige VanZant fight. Did you get a chance to watch it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got the information on it.
Yeah. What'd I tell you?
She upset the apple cart.
What'd I tell you? Didn't we talk about this?
Yes.
Yeah. Remember on the last episode, if you didn't listen to the last episode of the Boxing Breakdown, get in there, check out that last episode, listen to the predictions and listen to what I said about the fight. And you tell me if you saw what we talked about.
She was excellent in her delivery of the punches. She never stepped back. She never took a back seat to it. She was just, she dominated.
Yeah, so let's just
opinion.
For the Boxing Breakdown fans, for those of you that didn't see the Paige VanZant versus Britain Hart card, which is how it was billed, it was Knucklemania, and it was put on by the Bare Knuckle BKFC, and it was held in Tampa, Florida. Took place last Friday, February 5th, I think it was, and Britain Hart was not the favorite going into the fight, but certainly she won the hearts of everybody watching leading up to the fight and certainly after the fight. She dominated the fight. She won 4 out of the 5 rounds. Arguably, she won 4 out of the 5 rounds. And with Paige VanZant coming back in the 5th round, Britain fatigued a little bit in that last round because of the output that she put in, and Paige caught her with a couple of shots in that last round. But it was a flip flop back and forth in the 5th round, and really the beautiful story. It's like a Cinderella story, man. Like Britain Hart comes out with the victory, her hand gets raised. Her life is forever changed, and I'm just really happy for her, and happy for she's been through a lot, and we've all been through a lot. Full disclosure, I did train her for many of her recent fights, including a portion of the fight leading up to Paige VanZant, and due to a death in my family with my wife's father. We had some very, very difficult times. And so Britain took off and ended up going to out to California to train at Knuckleheads for the remainder of the fight. And I just am really, really grateful for the opportunity, and super grateful that she was able to come out with the win. And I'm just like, so happy about it. And I think Paige VanZant and Britain Hart will probably end up doing it again. Britain's got a lot of work to do in the future leading up to what's coming next. So I hope she'll get back into Pennsylvania with me, and we'll get to do our work again. That is my hope. And other than that, I just am super happy. I think her life has changed, and man, she did it, bro.
Yes, she did. You coached her to her subsequent wins before this. The last 2 fights she had, she was victorious, and you were her trainer at that time. Am I correct?
Oh, thank you, bro. Yeah, absolutely. I trained her, I trained her for the fight against Unique Harris. I trained her for the fight against Kim Wabick. And, and also for the Rendine fight, she wasn't here in PA, but certainly under our tutelage for the fight with Rendine, which led her up to the Paige VanZant fight. I really only had her for 2 weeks for the Paige VanZant fight, and then she was out for another 3 weeks in California. Thank God. Shout out to those in California who made it happen for a Britain. And she won the fight. And by no means, like I don't need credit, bro. I don't need any kind of credit for any of that. All I'm saying is I'm just so happy because this is a girl that really wants to grow. You know, she really wants to be a great fighter, and we're committed to that. And, I'm just happy for her. I'm happy for her children. I hope that the BKFC treats her the way she deserves to be treated and pays her what she deserves to be paid to be their champion, because that's what she's going to be. And that's it.
All right.
Yep. So that's where we're going to leave it. Shout out to Dave Feldman. Make sure that Britain Hart gets paid and compensated correctly for the work that she does, and for the amazing spokesperson she is for the BKFC and all of her sponsors. So that's what's up.
Other than that, I've spoken with her before. She was a very kind and passionate person. She was on a video podcast that I did with you and her. Yes. You all were coming back from a fight, and you were on the air with me. That was great.
Oh, we had a good time that day, man. She was a cut up on that podcast.
And her boxing knowledge is formidable. So congrats to her.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. You heard it right here on the Boxing Breakdown. Shout out Britain Hart. And so the last thing I think I'd love to just touch on a little bit. I want to open this can of worms up maybe on the next episode a little bit more as well. But I wanted to discuss with you finally here a little bit about padded records. Like, what's a padded record?
Well, if you're asking me, a padded record from my side of the fence is a learning curve. You have opportunity to fight fighters that you should win against, and maybe the first 4 or 5, there is no doubt that you will win that fight. Sometimes it extends past the first 4 or 5, but initially the first 4 or 5 may be, in fact, quote, padded fights. But after that, I believe they're padded to a point, but they're learning experiences. Certain skill sets are going to be presented to you that you have to overcome, that you will overcome, but you haven't seen that skill set before. So, in my opinion, a padded record is when you're definitely kind of fed, fighters that you can definitely win from, and fighters that you can learn from as you go forward. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't look at it negatively or positively, because so many fighters don't come through the amateurs anymore. They do or they don't. The ones that don't, they need that type of work. The ones who come from amateurs, they may not need as many, or they can jump right to the type of fighters that can teach them something initially. That's my take on it.
Right. So in other words, let's make a distinction here. Let's break it apart. Let's break apart what you discussed, because I think it was a good segue into. So there's 2 types of fighters. There's the fighters that have a very, very significant amateur background and pedigree, and they enter into the professional ranks with that knowledge and with that schooling under their belts, right? And then we have the fighters that have never had a amateur fight or very few amateur fights, and they find themselves learning as they go along in the professional ranks, right?
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about the fighter that has to learn how to be a fighter in the professional ranks. And a padded record, what does a padded record look like? So you might have a guy who does a pro debut and he might fight a guy that's 0-3, right, in his pro debut, right? And then he wins, and then he fights another guy that has a similar record, and he wins, and then he fights another guy and he wins. And all along, during those 3 fights or so, he's learned a little bit about how to box in that ring in the pro style. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So for the listeners out there, let's talk about the other fighter. Let's talk about the amateur fighters, right? An amateur fighter let's say an amateur fighter that has very little experience, has like 10 to 15 to 20 amateur fights, and then he turns pro. And he comes into he's a pro, he comes into the pros with limited amateur experience. Maybe won a couple of Golden Gloves or something like that, and 1 or 2 Golden Gloves, and then decides to turn pro, right? And what's a padded record look like for him?
What do you think?
I'm asking the question. I'm asking to the listeners out there. What does a padded record look like for an amateur who's had 15 fights or so, and he comes into the pros, and then he starts off in his career? His first fight is against a guy who's 0-1 or 0-3, and then his next fight is a guy against who has a record of 1-3. And then he fights another guy who has a record of 2-4, and he has a record, right? So I'm not sure the distinction of what that padded record looks like for that fighter. And then you have the fighter that has, 50 to 100 to 300 amateur fights. Maybe some national championship exposure. Maybe he's won, he's gone to the Olympics. Who knows? And then he comes out and he fights. And so what does a padded record look like for that fighter?
Lomachenko comes to mind. He had one. He had one padded fight, and he lost it.
Okay.
He was supposed to win that fight, but he didn't. He was supposed to be trained and learn from that fight, and he lost it to Salido, if that's correct pronunciation.
Okay. So that was his second fight. That was his second
fight.
Yeah, that was so Lomachenko's second fight was against Orlando Salido. His first fight. Okay, so Vasily Lomachenko's first fight was against a guy by the name of Jose Luis Ramirez. Ramirez's record was 25-3, right? And Lomachenko KO'd him. And then he went on to fight Orlando Salido in his second fight. Now, Orlando Salido was, I just have to tell you, this guy's got a record of 41-12 with 2 draws when he steps into the ring with Vasily Lomachenko. And guess what happened?
He was able to win because Lomachenko, in my opinion, hadn't necessarily dealt with a professional fighter.
Right.
And some of the nuances of being a professional fighter, he was not aware of those, and he was taken advantage of.
So Salido wins the fight, right? But the terrible thing for Orlando Salido is that he lost the belt because he was overweight on that fight. I don't know if you remember that, but
no, I did not recall that.
Yeah. So that was for the vacant WBO World Featherweight title, and yeah, he lost it on the scale. And but my point is, like, and guess what his third fight was? Who was his third fight? Vasily Lomachenko's third fight was against Gary Russell Jr., who's 24-0.
Champion.
He fights a guy who's 24-0. And then he goes on to fight guys like Nicholas Waters, Roman Martinez, Jason Sosa, Miguel. Yeah, I mean, he fights Guillermo Rigondeaux, who's one of the boxing prodigies in the sport, Jorge Linares, Jose Pedraza, Anthony Corella, Luke Campbell, and then finally Teofimo Lopez, where he gets he loses in a unanimous decision 12-round fight, which just took place October 17th of 2020. So that was, fairly recent. And so my point to you is this. My point is that padded records don't work. If you want to create a real fighter, whether they win or lose, you got to put them up against real people. Because in the amateurs cut their teeth in boxing. They cut it hard by fighting whoever they get put in front of, right? So in the amateurs, for those of you that don't know how the amateur circuit works, a fighter who's got 1 to 3 fights is considered a sub-novice. Once you pass 3 fights and you go 4 to 9 or 4 to 10 fights, you're considered novice. After you get past 10 fights, you're considered open class. You're an open class fighter once you hit 10 fights. So once you hit 10 fights and you're considered an open class fighter, you could fight a guy like Lomachenko, who just came out of the Olympics, who's got 300 fights if you chose to. You could fight anybody once you hit 10 fights. So after you hit 10 fights, it doesn't really matter who you fight. You can fight anybody, right? That's in the amateurs. And I mean, I've had fighters who have had, 15 fights and they're fighting guys with 122 amateur fights. And we win. So one of the lessons that I learned, at least I think I learned, is that there's a learning curve from 1 to 10. From 1 to 10, 1 to 15, you're going to be learning some things about this sport. I don't care if it's amateur or you don't have an amateur career. 1 to 10, 1 to 15 fights, you're going to be learning some things. But as trainers and as managers, where we go wrong is we pad our fighters' records. I don't, but there are people that legitimately think that if I take my fighter out to Mexico, or I take my fighter out to down in North Carolina, or I take my fighter over here or over there, that somehow I'm going to get them a win. And if I build up enough wins, somebody will pay attention to me. The problem, Harold, you tell me what you think. The problem is, let me just finish this thought out. The problem is that anybody who knows a sliver about boxing can look at your record and know that your record was padded and that you ain't, asparagus. That you're not much of anything. So my question is it worth it to pad a record? What do you think?
Well, from a promoter standpoint, he needs a marketable fighter. He needs opportunity for that fighter to be marketable in the eyes of the public, be marketable in the eyes of the matchmaker. And in some situations, a padded record is needed, or it can be used. If you have a fighter who's 10-0, and maybe his record is put together in such a manner, and another fighter who has the same record but is different, as in the competition may have been better. If you have a local show or a regional show on the marquee and for the fans, 10-0 versus 10-0 looks great. For the commission, that's not going to be an issue. They're both undefeated fighters.
Right.
Now, the purists are going to know that there's a huge disparity, but the public won't necessarily know that. They just see 10-0, 10-0. So therefore, sometimes I've seen some promoters will have fighters like that, and they're undefeated.
Right.
And they get to the position where they can be extremely marketable and really help a particular promotion because of that record was contrived as it was. So there's a place for it, in a sense, on the promoter side. For the fighter, he's going to be getting a better payday than he would ever get. Opportunity that he would never get if he wasn't brought along in such a manner. And that is good for him because that payday can take care of a lot of his expenses, and some of those kind of paydays can change his life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So if that's the case, you can't necessarily discount the padded record. However, sometimes they rise to the occasion. Yes, it looks like they really don't have a skill set and they've been fed, this type of opposition. But sometimes the mental aspect, as you know, will make you believe or understand that you are actually as good, better than what you are. And they can rise to the occasion or not. To me, it gives them opportunity to really prove themselves. But to a promoter, it is something that is a part of the business. You need to have so many undefeated fighters to simply do business for the public.
Right.
That's how I see it from a promoter's standpoint. From your standpoint, it's not necessarily conducive to the fighter, and it's just a nuance. As I say about our sport, it's the most beautiful, ugly, smelly, sweet-smelling sport in the world.
You got that right. Speaking of that, I just couldn't help but think about this issue, and I mean, there's been in my circles, a lot of discussions about padded records versus, bona fide records. The only thing I can tell you as a trainer is I'd much rather know that my fighter can get it done and that he has the real skills, and he's faced real opposition. Because the only thing you're going to need when you get up there is having faced real opposition and have real skills. If you've padded your way up to 15-0, man, from a manager's point of view, like as a manager, like I don't want to spend that kind of money with you, all the way to 15-0 to find out that you can't even cut it with, middle of the rung fighters. Let alone the creme de la creme, the top of the, world champion contenders. If you can't, if you haven't cut your teeth early on in your career, I mean, I'm looking at Julio Cesar Chavez, the guy, he's got 107 fights with only 6 losses. 4 of those losses came by way of KO, and he got 2 draws. And 85 of his wins came by way of knockout. Like, this is a guy, Julio Cesar Chavez, man, he cut his teeth, bro. I know he had an amateur background. Do you know what Julio Cesar Chavez's amateur background was?
No. What was it?
You know what? I don't really know. I know that he had an amateur background. Okay. I know it had to have been significant. It had to have been significant, but there's no record that I can find of what that was, Then you have his son, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who's very, very controversial fighter, on a lot of different levels, but he's got a record of 52 wins with only 5 losses, 2 of those losses coming by way of KO with 1 draw, 34 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Not a bad record. Now, the question is that record been padded, or is that a legitimate record? And why is he not the current world champion? Like, why? What is it?
Well, he's held a few belts.
Current was the operative. Current was the operative word in that sentence.
Well, I believe he's on the downside of his career at this time. But when he was, if you want to say in his prime, he was a formidable fighter, and he had a title or two from time to time. However, in Mexico, as you know, it's controlled, and you're definitely going to be on the positive side if you're supposed to be.
Right.
So that is a factor you have to look at.
Right. Well, that's now, are you suggesting that is fact, just for the listeners, or are you, what you just stated, is that fact based, or is that hearsay, or is that something you absolutely know is the way it works?
No, I do not know that.
Okay.
It's
just want to make sure we're clear for our listeners.
Yes, I don't know that.
Right. So we're making an assumption that, in fact, that if you see, this is what I know. If you think you're going to run over to Mexico and you're going to get an easy win, you got another thing coming, because those boys can fight. And a lot of those Mexican fighters, that's all they do, man. So, you might pick up a win here and there, but I'm saying buyer beware, brother. If you think you're going to go over there and just get wins, it doesn't work that way. Those fighters mean business. And I would just suggest, if, whoever's making the matches, just be real mindful of the fact that, these guys want to win too, and they want to change their lives too. And it ain't going to be that easy.
Yes. Delvin Haney was an example of, he was too young to be a professional fighter in America, and he did not want to do the Olympic trek.
Right.
So he went there.
Right.
He had several fights in that country.
Right.
And he was very successful. But as you said, those boys came to fight. So a lot of fighters now are going that route. They're going to Mexico. They're going there because they're too young to fight as a pro in America. And they are getting that education that they may not have gotten through the amateurs. And when they do come to America and they're old enough to fight, some of that padded stuff they get to step over.
Right.
Because they've experienced it in Mexico.
Right. Well, Devin Haney had, I think, I'm just rounding this number. He would know better. Devin, you can always shout it out and let us know the facts here. But I believe he had about 14 of his fights were fought over in Mexico. His record currently is 25 and 0, 16 with 15 KOs.
15 KOs. Okay.
Yeah, and I believe he had about 13 of those fights occurred over in Mexico. And yeah, for a fighter who can't go into the Olympics for whatever reason, be it immigration reasons. I had a fighter that wasn't able to fight he couldn't do any national tournament. So I had him during the amateurs, I had him as a pro, but he wasn't able to do any fights as an amateur, any outside of the state that he lived in. So that fighter, we had to wait for all the fighters to come home and actually get a shot at them after they came back from nationals and they came back from the Olympics and et cetera, whatever, trials, wherever if we thought that they were the top of the game, they were the Don Dada in the weight class, we fought them. And that was the only way that he could cut his teeth, is by facing the very, very best fighters in the amateur arena that way. And that's a good way to do it. And, you know, for some of these pros that can't get the fights or what have you, going over to Mexico. But I'm telling you right now, what I'm saying is that if you think those fights are going to be easy, they're not. They're not. And I would highly recommend that you cut your fighter's teeth the right way, because, you know, I get it. You know, you don't want to give him hard fight after hard fight after hard fight after hard fight. And really, I'm just trying to figure out what's the difference between knowing that you can beat the person. Shouldn't you know that you could beat the person that you fight every time you fight them?
That's the mindset that I believe every fighter should have, regardless of the situation. But when you're in that situation, you just feel like you can do anything. But that's why you have a corner and you have people behind you who can really make an estimation of what you can and what you really cannot do.
Right.
And who to put you in with. And you have to, you know, listen to those people. But if your fighter has supreme confidence, you don't want to break that. You don't want to cause him to have a problem with that. So you're gonna match him appropriately.
Right.
So as long as you can keep his spirit and put so many wins make so many wins available to him, when the big stage comes, mentally he's ready, and then it's up to you to get him physically ready.
Right.
But
right.
4 or 5 fights of being successful can only help.
Yeah.
Whether they're contrived or not, they help his mind.
I love it, Harold. That's beautiful. And I love the fact that you touched on the spirituality of it all. You know, the fighter having the mental, the physical, and the spiritual sides of them working in harmony to achieve greatness. Because without one of them, you're kind of, you know, stuck out there. Your frame's cracked. You can't get it all done. As my partner, Dwayne Fenn, would say, the frame is cracked, coach. And I'll be like, yep, frame's cracked, brother. So listen, man, I have just enjoyed this conversation. This has been a real, real good one, man. We broke this down big time. And I thank you so much for being on the broadcast. I thank you for listening in, everyone. It's been a pleasure. And please don't forget to visit us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'll hook up with you there. And until the next time, Harold, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
And I'll see you the next time on the Boxing Breakdown. Peace and love. We're out.
Fight fans, join host Mark Roxey and special guests as they break down all aspects of the boxing world, including news, business, management, training, promotions, fan reactions, upcoming events, matchups, future boxing stars, title fights, state of the boxing world, and all the stuff you don't see when you watch boxing. This podcast is released each week on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Live streamed on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook Live. It's the Boxing Breakdown, hosted by Mark Roxey.